Once upon a time, there was a man named Zack Snyder. This man was a visual storyteller. He cemented his name within the cinematic medium with his use of desaturated colors and excessive slow motion sequences. After climbing the ranks in Hollywood for years, he found himself working at Warner Brothers, starting a new era of films based on DC comic book characters after Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy came to an end. In 2013, Zack Snyder debuted his beginning to the DCEU, more commonly referred to as the Snyderverse. What would then follow is a series of 15 films and one season of television, all of varying degrees of quality. After multiple critical and financial failures, the Snyderverse finally came to a close in 2023. Fast forward to today, and Warner Brothers has decided to start over fresh. Well, kind of. They've appointed James Gunn and Peter Safran co-CEOs of their new studio division, DC Studios, a studio that will exclusively focus on producing content for their new version of the DC cinematic universe. I can see how big fans of that previous iteration of this world are not only confused, but a little frustrated with the way that this is all panning out. You see, there are elements of the previous series, like Henry Cavill's Superman in particular, that a lot of fanboys are really attached to, and I can understand that. Gunn has basically decided to take the approach that the only previous stories that are still going to remain canon in his universe are the properties that he already had a personal hand in. This means that while the series to many will be starting this summer with his Superman film, it in fact is beginning with the new animated series Creature Commandos. At the end of the day, all that really matters is the storytelling effective? But, you gotta call a spade and all that. The guy really did just light everybody else's stuff on fire. But when it works, and I'm glad to report that Creature Commandos really works. This is a great show. In Creature Commandos, Amanda Waller once again puts together a Suicide Squad, but this time comprised exclusively of monsters, save for their leader, Rick Flag Sr. Their mission? Take down an international super terrorist. The show has a format a la Lost, or Orange is the New Black, in which there's an ongoing storyline that's intercut with flashbacks of a specific character for any given episode. It's heavily influenced by what came before, the Suicide Squad especially, but as the show goes on, each of the characters forms their own unique identity. Let me give you the character rundown. You've got Bridezilla, Nazi Killer 9000, Flamin' Hot Skeleton, Fish Lady, Action Man, and Weasel. By dedicating full episodes to each individual character, we come to understand who they truly are, why they were incarcerated, and, in broader terms, why they have all been ostracized from society. I liked the initial episode of the show, but when I was really sold was by the end of episode 2. Episode 2 focuses on the bride, and we get to see her backstory through the lens of a different take on the Frankenstein lore. Suffice it to say, this story has a lot of interesting commentary on love and human relationships. I never would have thought that Creature Commandos would be having my brain drawing comparisons to Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things, but that's where we are. Having been created as an object of desire, the bride is desperate to establish her own agency, resulting in a violent montage between her and her would-be lover, Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster if you're a snob. This montage foreshadows many others to come. In fact, I would say pretty much every episode has its own version of the violent music video action scene. The show's punk rock soundtrack really adds to the frenetic pacing, and it gives the Commandos a sort of pirate-like vibe. I'd even go so far as to say that I enjoy the show's theme song more than Peacemaker's. The violence, on the other hand, is completely over the top, offering the kind of spectacle that you can really only get from cartoons or comic books. Gore isn't my favorite thing in the world, but when done right, it can be pretty funny and entertaining, and there's definitely some good stuff in here if you're looking for that. But what it's all about is the characters. I won't go into any of the backstories much more than I did with the brides, but just know with this show you're going to get themes of racism, animal abuse, the cycle of revenge, and even euthanasia. It's really just a bunch of lighthearted good times. That's what James Gunn's writing always seems to get right with these kind of teams. He can take the darkest subject matter and infuse it with the feeling of a Saturday morning cartoon. I think the motif at the core of this show is isolationism. Even more so than the Suicide Squad before them, each one of these characters has a reason to feel unloved and unworthy of love, and yet they're all still trying to seek out some kind of connection, some kind of redemption.
Even Frankenstein, a character whose whole shtick is basically just being a fuckboy that can't handle rejection, has humanizing characteristics. At the end of the day, he's just somebody that wants a companion, and I feel like that's something a lot of us can relate to. That's not to say that these characters aren't monsters, because they definitely are, but I think that's what makes them really interesting. A character like Dr. Phosphorus, for instance, has some really questionable deeds in his past, I'll just put it that way. But by the end of the show, I found myself rooting for everybody on the team, even the most despicable of characters, because they're just that much fun to be around. The back and forth is particularly strong between Nina and the bride. They are by far the best relationship in the show, and may even have you in tears by the end. These two characters have quite literally never had a friend before, and watching them bond should warm even the most cold-hearted of creatures. One of very few negatives I have for this show is actually the character of Rick Flag Sr. He's played as kind of an idiot by the end, honestly. He's seduced and taken advantage of in the middle of a major mission, but that's not even my primary issue with him. My main issue is that they didn't give him his own fleshed out backstory, his own episode to delve into the reasons that brought him here. As the leader of the team and the only one who's not incarcerated, it would have been interesting to see what kind of choices led him to be involved with Amanda Waller. Playing on that whole what is and isn't continuity kind of thing that I mentioned at the top, Rick Flag Sr. is directly related to a character from the Suicide Squad film, and it would have also been interesting to see what his relationship was like with his son prior to his death. Another thing I'm not a huge fan of is the art style. I kept waiting for it to grow on me the same way that the characters did, but I just never really got there. There's nothing bad about it per se, it just hasn't stuck with me the way that other art styles have in recent animation greats like Blue-Eyed Samurai or Scavenger's Reign. These feel like nitpicks though, when every episode is so damn entertaining and chock full of character moments. Even something as dumb as the cops are in Weasel's backstory doesn't bother me as much as it normally would, because the emotional weight of the scene is still there. The story ends up feeling more intimate and personal than most comic book affair, and I think that's why it's so successful to me. The plot does develop into a threat that could seemingly encompass the entire world, but it never really reaches that level of magnitude. What I'm saying is that the final conflict still comes down to just two people in a room, as opposed to some big blowout boss fight, and I think that really works in the show's favor. It makes this team feel more like an actual government secret organization, rather than superheroes that are covered in plot armor. The finale left a greater impact than expected, easily skyrocketing the bride to my favorite character in the show. While this mission ends with the Commandos having some more than significant battle wounds, I'll be eagerly anticipating their next venture out into the field. If this truly is the beginning of the new DC universe, then I think we're off to a good start. I'm already digging the tone and the style far more than I did the Zack Snyder iteration of this world. James Gunn has given audiences yet another cast of morally gray weirdos to get attached to, and I think we're all the better for it. This one gets an Amanda Waller. Bring on Superman. Did anybody else find it a little weird that James Gunn put a cartoon version of himself in the opening credits? What kind of a narcissist would you have to be to include a cartoon of yourself in your projects? Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, you. I'm talking to you specifically. Thank you.